Alright, so today we're going to be talking about color theory. What I'd like for you to do is in your note-taking section of your sheet that I gave you, at the very top you're seeing the color wheel. What I'd like for you to do is go ahead and write in order the colors that you're seeing on the screen and put them in order on that pie sheet, that little pie that's on the top part of your sheet. So the color wheel is a diagram used to show us how to mix colors. There are 12 colors on the color wheel. They go in order based on what colors are mixed together to make other colors. We begin with the three primary colors, red, yellow, and blue. These are called primary colors because primary means first. You have to start with these colors to mix other colors on the color wheel. The primary colors cannot be mixed in any other way. We can use primary colors to mix the secondary colors, which are orange, green, and violet. Yellow is mixed with red to make orange, yellow is mixed with blue to make green, and red is mixed with blue to make violet. A certain tip we have is to keep in mind that you should mix the amounts almost evenly in order to make a secondary color. So when you're making orange, you want to make sure to have the same amount of yellow as you do red. But the red, since it's a darker color, is going to kind of overpower the yellow a little bit, so adding a slightly more of the yellow will kind of help even that out. We can also use the primary colors to get intermediate colors by changing the ratio of what we use. Intermediate colors are red-violet, red-orange, yellow-orange, yellow-green, blue-green, and blue-violet. The name of the intermediate colors comes from the two colors mixed together to create them. The rule is that the primary color comes first in the name. We need to call the intermediate colors by their proper name. We don't call them teal, lime, or maroon, or things like that. It's important that when you're referring to red-orange, you say red-orange instead of orange-red. Remember, you typically need more of the lighter color when mixing. Keep this in mind with your color ratios when mixing. And of course, if we're mixing red-orange, you want that color to lean on the red side. Whereas if we're mixing yellow-orange, you want it to lean on the yellow side. How to mix intermediate colors. To mix red-violet, you're going to add red and violet. Same as red with a little blue. Red-orange, red plus orange. So adding red with yellow. Yellow-orange is yellow with orange, same as yellow with a little bit of red. Yellow-green is yellow and green, same as yellow with a little bit of blue. Blue-green is blue and green, same as blue with red. Same as blue with yellow. And blue-violet is blue and violet, same as blue and red. So that is why there are 12 colors in order in the color wheel. Remember that value refers to how dark or how light a color is. By mixing white or black with a color, you can create different values of that color. A color mixed with white is called a tint. A color mixed with black is called a shade. You can create many different tints by adding more white to a color, and you can create many different shades by adding more black to a color. And here's an example. In the middle, you're seeing the pure red, and then as we go to the left, you're seeing what happens when more white is added. So when tints happen, you're going to see that part on the left-hand side, and the same thing goes for the right-hand side. When you add black to a color, it gets darker as you go more towards the right. A color mixed with black and white, which would be gray, is called a tone. We will not be adding black and white at the same time to our color in this project. In other words, you will not have gray for your colors. When you mix all three primary colors together, that's when you get a neutral. We won't be using tones or neutral for this project, but they will certainly come into play later on in this unit when we are trying to mix colors we see in real life. Tones and neutrals are often very natural looking. We use them for skin tones or natural objects that you'll see out in nature, like trees, things like that. So here you can kind of see the difference between a tint, a shade, and a tone. The tones look more muted, the shades are darker, and the tints are lighter. And the picture on the right-hand side is showing that when you mix all three primary colors together, that is when you get a neutral. It'd be more like a brown. Okay, so for your first color theory unit project, you're going to be making your own color wheel. And this is an example of what your color wheel could look like. You will create a color wheel that has repeated pattern in each of the 12 wedges and slices. It's called a radial design. Each wedge will include the hue and 4 or 5 tints and 4 or 5 shades. You will only have red, yellow, blue, black, and white paint. First, you'll go ahead and trace the wheel, making notches to separate the wedges. Make sure all pencil lines are drawn nice and light. Use a ruler to draw the lines to separate the wedges. So in the end, it should look something like this. Draw out your design on the template using a wooden pencil. Use 9 or 11 shapes. Don't make them too small. Once approved, you can go over in a thin Sharpie. The reason why we don't want to go too small is because if you make the shapes really small, then it's more difficult to paint those shapes. Go over to a light table and trace the wedge into all 12 slices. Keep repeating this step until all the wedges are filled in. Label the colors in order. So on the outside of your color wheel, you're going to be putting the color on the outside in order from red all the way to red orange. Or, I'm sorry, red all the way to red violet. Number the shapes of your template. Scatter the numbers. Keep this because you're going to need it as your guide. The reason why we have you scatter your numbers is because the numbers look very similar to each other. So the wedge is actually showing you kind of what not to do. If you put an 11 and a 10 next to each other, they are both shades, so it's very difficult to see the difference between those two. You want to try to mix up the tints and shades to be next to each other so that you can kind of see those shapes a little bit better. Make a key for yourself. So 1 is the lightest, and your highest number will be the darkest. Remember to have one shape be your hue. So if you have 1 through 11, number 6 is your hue, and then 1 through 5 are tints, and 7 through 11 are shades. Here are some examples. These are all student made. So they're not painted perfectly, but the students did a really nice job kind of trying their best to mix those tints and shades within that color. There, of course, are things that they can always work on, but for the most part, this is Art 1, so we just kind of want to see what you embrace when trying this new project and just do the best you can. One thing to keep in mind is how this works is making sure you use that numbered template. So if we go back to this little guy, you need to make sure that every single wedge has a number 10 in the correct spot. I've had some students just kind of do whatever they want, and then the design doesn't look radial. So we see here how, let's say if this is a tint, let's say it's number 3, all the 3 tints for every color are in the same spot. That way, they look uniform. So here you're going to kind of see how the student didn't really follow their template all that well. This doesn't look like a pure color. Yeah, over here it's looking like the hue, and then randomly over here in the red it looks like the hue. You need to make sure to really follow your template. That way it's more uniform, and it's kind of, the objective of the project. And we got this sad guy. Same idea. The student just was kind of going all over the place, not really following where the, like they messed up right here with red, orange in the orange section, so not really paying attention where they're painting, and also just not kind of following their template to get the same number in every spot. All right, so it's time to paint. Starting with a primary wedge, so you can either choose your blue, your red, or your yellow wedge. Get out only the colors you need. You also need 2 brushes, a thick and a thin one, a cup of water, and a paper towel. You need less paint than you think. So there's the quarter. That's how much paint you guys should be putting on your palette. Please don't waste the paint. Start with a hue first because it's already mixed for you. So I decided my hue is going to be shape number 6, which happens to be right in the middle of my wheel. You can do that on purpose. When you mix your tints, add the color into the white. Add a tiny bit of color at a time as you mix each tint. It's really important if you guys try to put white into a darker color, then you're going to need a ton more white. So it's important to go ahead and mix the darker color into the lighter color. So in this case, we're putting blue into white to make our first tint. Mix it up. So you can see right here, you see striations of blue within the white. You have to keep on mixing until it's all the same color. There we go, that's better. So this will be my lightest blue tint. So I have to find my shape that's labeled 1 and paint that shape with my lightest tint. There we go. So now it's time to go ahead and a little bit more blue. So this time I'm going ahead and making my number 2 tint. So adding a little bit more blue to my brush, mixing it in, and then finding my number 2. And you continue doing that until you're done with all your tints. Now it's time to mix your shades, and this is so important. Once you're done making your tints, you need to make sure you step away from that tint pile. You're not touching it again. If you add black to that tint pile, you're making gray, and we don't want gray in our project. So on your palette, you're going to be putting a little bit more blue and a tiny bit of black to make your shades. Make sure to rinse your brush because you have white on that brush of yours, and dry it off completely. And now it's time to go ahead and make a shade. Now remember what I said before, you are adding the darkest color to the lighter color. So in this case, the black is darker than blue. You're adding a tiny bit of black into the pile of blue and mixing it up to make your first shade. There we go. Using my template to make sure I put in the right spot. It's my number 7. There it goes. Keep going until you've added a little bit more black to each of your pile, so you've made your 7 through 11 wedge. So working in this order, you're going to make all your primary wedges first, then your secondary wedges, then your intermediates. Try to finish about 1 to 2 wedges per class period. If you mix a color, you really want to try to finish that wedge. That way you don't have to try to remix that exact color next class. When you're doing secondary and intermediate wedges, mix up the color completely first. So mix up your green, let's say, and divide that green in half because you need half that green for your tints and then half that green for your shades. When it's time to clean up, make sure to rinse your palette in the sink. There should be no paint left on your palette. Use the toothbrushes and the scrub brush that are back there along with some soap. Also clean your brushes. That means that you need to put your both hands underwater. I use the brush in my right hand and I kind of swish it around my left hand to really make sure I get all the paint out of it. Wash any globs of paint down the drain. Rinse your water cup and make sure your brushes go upright back in the cup. Other reminders, don't forget to wipe your tabletops. Put the paint back where it belongs. You're going to store your work on your shelf, so you want to make sure that everything's nice and neat and tidy. You're working in paint, so you want to make sure that your project is staying nice and flat and nothing is resting on top of it. Tempera does take about 10 minutes to dry, so it's not a paint that's going to take forever to dry, but you still want to make sure not to smudge it in any way while it's still drying. And tempera does lighten a little as it dries, so you may see your colors change slightly. You will have 13 classes to complete this project. The color wheel handout breaks down the dates you're given as well as the due date. Take your time with your work. These will come out great if you know what you're doing and you work hard. Anyone can make a great color wheel if they put in the effort. If you are behind, get caught up along the way instead of at the end. So it's very important that we use our class time wisely. There will not be a lot of time for social butterflies walking around the room. You need to be in your seat working on your color wheel to make sure you're done on time.